Thank you for that, Sean. Destination Newry, we're with you all across the planet. You're with us, we hope, and bringing you what we like to think of as a kind of eclectic mix of music and musings, and make of it what you will. It's good that you're with us, and it's good that you're with us this morning, and it's Professor Phillip O'Keefe, and you're from Belfast. You're from the Belfast Centre for the Study of Suicide. Thank you for taking the trouble to come up, because in this area we know more than we would want to know about it, people taking their own lives, and we try to come to terms with it. Families try to be reconciled with the loss, but we don't seem to be able to come to terms with a way of making it a thing of the past, if that's possible, that people do not take their own lives or involve in self-harm. Where are you on it, and what led to the establishment of the centre?
First of all, I'm not a professor. I'm much more modest than that. I have a doctorate in the study of suicide. My position is that in relation to my own family's experience of suicide, that's what triggered my interest. Until what happened in our family happened, I wouldn't have been any more interested in suicide than the average person is, because the average person is not interested in it. In fact, suicide and the mention of it is a conversation stopper, because what do you say after you have raised the issue of suicide in a natural conversation? What do you say then, other than platitudes?
Yeah. So you're going beyond platitudes, though, or seeking to go beyond platitudes.
On the basis of my aim in seeking to establish the centre would be to facilitate the development of a knowledge base, an accessible knowledge base, using modern technology, such that all who wanted to know the answers to their questions could find those answers and make of them what they will. With that as a kind of a core resource, I also feel that courses in the study of suicide, at whatever level is suitable for the level of interest and capacity that an individual might have. You might have a certificate in suicide studies, a diploma, an advanced diploma, a degree in suicide studies, which would facilitate people then to become accredited workers in the field of suicide prevention, intervention, postvention. At the moment, that is totally lacking up here. There's evidence of some of it in Dublin. There's a college in Dublin that offers some courses. They cost an arm and a leg to do those courses.
Those courses, that expertise to be gained, would this be aimed at, or would they be suitable for someone who feels vulnerable, or would they be better aimed at people who are perhaps not vulnerable at that time and who are there reaching out to help people in the community? Are they courses for professional people, perhaps?
What I'm trying to think of is this, going back to what I said a moment ago, that generally speaking, people aren't interested. It's a conversation stopper, it's a turn off. However, once people experience the aftermath of another person's suicide who was close to them, it triggers an interest for them, for many of them, raising all those questions about why, how, when, could anything have been done about it? Why did this person choose to end their life in this way? So it's that type of individual, I think, would be the one who might be attracted to a properly structured, accredited course in suicide studies. Not that you're going to find the answer to the question why, because the principal witness is no longer available.
So clearly these were questions that you asked yourself at the time of your own trauma. A difficult journey to get over it, I guess, obviously.
Well, you don't. At the time, I'm talking about the 1980s. 1980s, I was a bit younger. I had a different lifestyle. We were hit, as it were, we were almost coshed behind the ear by each of these events. We didn't know what to make of them. Effectively, they destroyed our family. My active interest in the academic aspects of suicide, which is where I am at the present time, although I do have a psychotherapy practice where I would see people who believe themselves to be vulnerable across a whole range of issues. But my reason for becoming interested in this was the result of training as a counsellor and seeking a research topic. And the research topic that I chose, probably linked back to the family experience, was I wonder, how do people handle this? I could vaguely remember how I handled it largely by crying about it and trying to forget about it. And because the intercommunication within families is heavily negatively affected by the event of suicide. And so that commenced me on the research path, which has taken me into the study of suicide.
Aren't we all, to a greater or lesser extent, sitting on the perch of suicide? It can come with the greatest of ease to any one of us at any time, because the mental, as I understand it, maybe I'm wrong, the mental position, the mental condition is that it can vary in the twinkling of an eye, and people use the adage, it's a hairline, we're a hair's breadth away from being mentally healthy and mentally unhealthy.
I wouldn't, I mean, I would respect that view, of course, but that wouldn't be my view.
It wouldn't be?
No.
So I'm wrong in thinking that ordinary healthy people on the Monday or Tuesday could experience a trauma on the Wednesday or Thursday, and on the Friday might take their own lives, so to speak. The timeline would be longer.
Trauma is a word that need to be careful about what we would mean by trauma. If you're talking about life events, things that happen in your life which you find difficult to handle, perhaps sudden events which cause you to be in a situation where you believe that you cannot cope. Sometimes there's an element of risk around that. But coping with bereavement, for example, coping with all those things, those negative things that happen to humans, humans have been quite adaptive in coping with all of that stuff.
We're stronger than we suspect.
That's why there's 7 billion of us around. We are a resilient species. Now, you're not asking me about the resilience of the species.
No.
You're asking me about people who are vulnerable. People who are vulnerable sometimes don't understand about their vulnerability and how it can be addressed. And that's what leads people. It leads people into hopelessness, into a feeling of a cul-de-sac feeling, shall we say, where they feel there is no exit for them from this feeling of hopelessness and abandonment and pain, other than to escape the pain. And the way that they would choose to escape the pain is by taking their own life.
Are they invariably wrong in that assessment of their situation?
I don't want to mention our friend Socrates here, but Socrates drank the hemlock, and Socrates, a Greek philosopher, reckoned to have been one of the most brilliant minds that humanity has ever produced. But the reasons why he took his own life were complex and individual to him, and observers of his life have written at length about how Socrates' death by his own hand came about. But I would tend to say that each suicide event, or even each act of suicidal behavior, is in itself unique and worthy of exploration and examination, which it doesn't get, because we have a tendency to want to generalize and say things like, he or she was depressed, he or she lost their job, he or she lost their relationship, and list off the life events that could possibly be believed to have been triggers for that kind of self-destructive behavior. But we would never actually know much about that. The inquest system, for example, here, it's so weak. Most deaths by suicide are not inquested. Most deaths in the Republic, deaths that are not regarded as being natural deaths due to serious illness or age-related debility and so on, are the subject of inquests. And you can read in any of the southern newspapers fairly detailed reports of inquests. And the level of suicide in the Republic is on a par with the level of suicide in the North also.
Strikes me as odd because not that, but I spend a lot of my time in Africa, northwest Nigeria, where the people have nothing. The rains betrayed us. They came and then they stopped. Those are happy people. Suicide is virtually unknown. What do we glean from that kind of scenario?
Well, you're talking culture. Culture, which would be the determinant, the boundaries of acceptable behavior. Our culture here has made suicide acceptable, right? Previously, if you look at the history of suicide, particularly in Catholic countries, Ireland, I suppose, used to be a Catholic country, and where suicide would have been regarded as the unforgivable sin, and you would be buried in unconsecrated ground, and your family's property would be raided and pilloried because an act of suicide would have been regarded as an act against the community. And so in those situations, when you're talking Nigeria and Islamic countries in particular, that's a kind of an underpinning sort of security for people. It's, we won't do this because it will only harm our family, so we will stick it out. That kind of prevention doesn't exist for us anymore.
And
suicide is acceptable behavior in our culture.
But isn't that the final statement of the person who takes his or her own life? That I know this will affect my family, but I'm so far gone, I'm either not thinking about that, or I am thinking about it and have thought it through, and I've decided that they're better off without me. So they're not, that notion of not doing it because of family doesn't obtain here.
Well, there's a couple of, sorry to go into the theory. There are two important theories which have looked at that. And one of them is a very fashionable theory at the moment, theory by an American psychologist called Thomas Joyner. Thomas believes that there are three attributes that each suicide event has. And they relate to what you've just said. That a feeling of, he uses very Americanese type words, which we would understand here, many people wouldn't. But he uses, first of all, he says that they will have a perception of being a burden on their family. I am no use. I am of no value to my family. So it's a perception, it's not a reality. They would come to believe that. So perceived burdensomeness is what he calls it. The second one is how that causes isolation by the person from family and friends. In other words, they go into themselves, as we might say. So a person who takes their own life requires that kind of separation, that kind of being apart from. That person is able then to engage in their own thought process without sharing it with anyone else. And then his third attribute, which is a very interesting one, he says that you've got to learn how to take your own life. You've got to learn how to put up with the pain that would be involved in any method of harming yourself. And I won't go into those methods. So he says that each, I don't particularly accept fully what he says, but I think it's a very interesting set of criteria against which we could put any suicidal event that we read about or hear about, and it might help us to understand better what has happened to that individual.
So the necessary act of distancing yourself from those you love and who love you.
Yeah.
If you didn't distance yourself, you wouldn't take your life.
Well, there's a possibility that, for example, here are you and I, Rowan, were I to produce a knife and attempt to slit my throat, I don't think I would be allowed to do that.
No, you wouldn't.
It's a secret, private, may not be totally secret, but it's a private act. It's carried out in private. It's not carried out and witnessed by anyone else. People may film it on social media and so on. But did you get my point?
I do.
It's an event because the natural kind of response by humans to another human in difficulty is to seek to help them. So the person who's suicidal knows that. But they already have developed this mindset that there is nothing more that can be done by them or by anyone for themselves.
These are obviously issues you will be addressing within the centre, and that's a very impressive piece of intellectual memorabilia, if you like, or intellectual material. It makes sense what you've said, and that's something that you can. It's a template for an intervention, if you like, if you recognise that, and if society recognises that. But at the moment, we seem to be far from proactive in it. We wait until it has occurred, and we react, and we bury, and we sympathise, and we wring our hands, and we say, why did it happen? I'm just wondering, with the prevalence of suicide, ought it to be, it's not on a single school curriculum anywhere, the study of suicide. I don't see any of the outreaches from any of the churches being involved in a consideration of it in any kind of depth. Are we brushing it under the carpet and hoping that such a thing will not come to our door?
Well, in relation to what suicide prevention programs in schools might achieve, it's perfectly kind of feasible and natural, logical even, to believe that if we want to save the lives of our students, we will introduce suicide prevention programs into the curriculum, and we will bring experts and people like O'Keefe and company in, and they will present these very digestible expert views and so on, and there will be knowledge transmitted. Unfortunately, you're waiting for me to say unfortunately, the most recent piece of research, and this is this year's research, 2013, I'll just read what I've said here. A major US study found little evidence of reductions in suicide behaviour among youth following an analysis of 14 school-based suicide prevention programs.
Wow. It might even more finely tune them.
But what it meant was that knowledge and attitudes and towards suicide could be affected. In other words, people would have more knowledge about it, but there's little evidence of the suicidal behaviour being affected one way or the other.
So at what stage is it propitious to interact with a possible victim? At what stage is it appropriate to try and bring the contact more close again with the family, of letting the person know you cannot distance yourself from your loved ones because their love for you is unconditional, and you must not do what you're doing because in doing it you'll destroy them?
Well, when a person makes that disclosure, that's what the idea of suicide awareness is about. And there are lots of people interested in presenting courses in the voluntary organisations across the country in relation to what would be the signs of suicide and so on. Right? Quite rarely, though, despite the fact that there's increasing knowledge of what the signs might be, You know, even in what a person might say, for example, I don't think I can stick this for much longer. I think I'm going to get out of all this. I think I'm going to leave all this. In words or behaviors such as starting to give away materials and things which are of personal value. In other words, to start a kind of a finishing process could be seen to be a prelude to suicidal behavior, right? But unless that's recognized as that, and the difficulty is that me, in relation to my relatives who took their own lives, I have no recollection of any awareness of that. I hadn't even considered it as a possibility. And I think that that's the great barrier. It's rather like, or it's rather not like, a mother and her children and measles, mumps and rubella knee-jerk to get the inoculations until that idiot of a scientist disturbed all of that recently. But fortunately, mothers have come back and are getting the triple injection for their and protection for their children. But there is no such inoculation in relation to suicidal behavior.
I think what's coming out of this is the need for an increased community awareness of whatever vulnerability exists within our neighbours and our friends and our family, and to have a kind of third all-seeing eye and a third all-seeing ear, so that you're actually absorbing people's joy and people's pain. Easy to absorb the joy and to run with it, but you run the other way from the pain. And I think as a community that regards itself as being in some manner spiritual, that should be a journey we're on.
Well, you would have liked to have thought so. However, I got to go back to the fact that we're not talking about group behavior here. We're not talking about groups of people, as it were, cooperating with each other in order to take a whole lot of lives. We're talking about an individual who secretly and privately and within themselves, I mean, Sneidman, who's one of the experts in suicide, he talks about suicide as being a drama within the mind of the person who is planning their own suicide. A drama within their own mind. Invisible, unacknowledgeable by others, unless they know or have some kind of awareness of some evidence of this. And of course, a person who wants to take their own life, they won't be making that easy, will they?
They won't.
They won't be making that easy.
No.
They might, a lot of cases and a lot of work done on this, where a suicidal urge, as it were, or impulse, is not that, but is a cry for help, a cri de coeur.
Yeah.
If that was able to be identified, similarly then, you would save the person, or be in a position to save them by helping them. But to be able to draw that distinction, you have to have some kind of knowledge. You have to have studied the thing, Rowan.
Yeah.
It doesn't come naturally. If you rely on newspapers, or God save the presence, media presentations for your knowledge about suicide, you won't have very much understanding of it.
There's a little bit of discipline involved for us to find out and to make ourselves a bit more knowledgeable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing, you have your work cut out for you at the centre.
Well, let me put it this way. There's resistance among the universities and among people who work in the universities to what I'm doing. I mean,
why would there be that?
Well, because, for example, the Public Health Agency is the publicly funded government agency with responsibility in this area, and your tax dollars and mine are paying already for that. But have you ever heard of the Public Health Agency's work in the study of suicide?
No, sir, I have not.
No, you haven't. Well, I know a little bit about it, but my point is, in relation to the way that we approach the study of suicide, there's a lack of cooperation. In other words, I've attempted over the last 3 or 4 years since I achieved the doctorate to make contact with people, with individuals in the Public Health Agency, but without success. Wow. So there's a lack of cooperation. They would have recognized this guy is very interested, this guy is possibly knowledgeable, this guy could be supportive for us in our work. I didn't get that. Had I been sort of sitting in their chair,
oh, you would have welcomed it.
I think I'd have been doing that.
You would have, yeah.
So, lack of cooperation, lack of coordination, not really interested in what I'm doing. We're doing this. Are you doing anything like that? Can we get together on that?
They're not saying that.
Absence of that. Collaboration, actually working together, bring O'Keefe into our team,
Yeah.
etc. Integration, looking at the work that has already been done and trying to find ways to approach the whole subject in terms of study and practice, and ways to involve the whole population of the place rather than just experts or people who have survived the loss of a loved one, but to involve everyone who
Phillip,
wants to be in.
It's the way it has to go.
And then the other couple of words I got here, I got to throw them out. Connectedness and focus, so that the effort, because resources are short, you have to actually make sure it's focused in on where it will have the most value and the most effect.
Do you welcome people contacting you at the centre?
Of course, yeah.
How do they do that?
Well, I have a web page
Yep.
at the moment, and people can get it if they look for my name,
Phillip O'Keefe.
Phillip O'Keefe.
Philipo
Apostrophe K.
apostrophe K double E F E.
2 F's preferably.
2 F's.
That'll be grand. Yeah. And if they, at the moment, it's being done through the Yell outfit.
Y-E-L.
Y-E-L-L.
Y-E-L-L.
So that could get you to that page, which
Okay.
would get you a phone number and so on.
Phillip, you've come down to talk to us. You've enlightened me this morning. You've set a trend of thought going for me. I thank you for that.
You're
and
very
I wish
welcome.
you well.
You're very welcome, Ron.
Go well. God bless you.
Thank you.
Sean, some music to get us on further.